Howdy Beans, and welcome back to another exciting episode of the Howdy Beans podcast. I'm your host, Luke the Howdy Bean. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're all good. As per usual, today we're going to be looking at a movie that I absolutely love and adore, and a movie that, in my opinion, is underappreciated and underloved and not talked about enough. So today we're going to be looking at Godzilla from 1998, or should I say Godzilla. But before we get into all of that and more, I want to do a bit of housekeeping because I like to keep my house nice and clean, especially if Godzilla is around and he's stomping and making a mess. I'm going to need to invest heavily in a lot of brooms and buckets to clean up all the rubble. And you can help me by doing the things I'm about to mention. So if you're listening on YouTube, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you're listening on Spotify, don't forget to leave a 5-star review, maybe a comment down below, and to follow me on there. Also, if you want to hear more short form content from me, then to make sure that you follow me on TikTok and Instagram by searching the Howdy Beans podcast, and you'll find me there. So today is going to be the beginnings of something wonderful. It's going to be the beginnings of something magical, something that I've wanted to do for a very, very long time. When I was thinking of what I wanted to do for June, what I wanted to do this year, one of the big ideas was I wanted to look at monster movies. So this month, I'm doing something special, something I like to call Kaiju July, where I look at giant monster movies. Because I love this genre. I think it's absolutely fantastic. I think it's brilliant. I love the Godzilla movies. I love the King Kong movies. I love Pacific Rim, So I really wanted to look at these sort of films. I wanted to really delve deep into these and to see why I love them so much. Because I thought I had so much that I wanted to say and talk about them. So I wanted to kind of jump on it. And again, this leads into why I decided to talk about Godzilla, especially the 1998 movie, because you're probably all sitting there going, hold on a second, Luke, why are you talking about Godzilla 1998? That movie was terrible. That movie was trash. If you're going to start with Godzilla, at least do the new sort of 2014 Godzilla. Or, if you're going to do Godzilla, do the classic Godzilla, the original sort of kaiju movies. And to be honest, I completely agree. I completely understand where you're coming from. But the truth is, I love this movie. I really do. I was born in 1998. So when I was born, this movie, had no effect on me at all. This is a movie that I discovered a little bit later on videotape. When I was, again, younger, I'd say maybe 3, 4, thereabouts. But it had such a profound effect on me because up until that point, I'd never seen a kaiju movie. I didn't know what kaiju was. I never saw a giant monster movie, So you put the film on and you've just got a giant giant crocodile thing running through New York. It's brilliant. It was fantastic. And it's one of them things of, again, maybe it's nostalgia goggles. Maybe, it is that's blinding me from seeing the truth. I don't know. I just really enjoy it. I've got the movie on DVD. I remember having it on video. I don't know where the videotape has gone. Also, this might be a bit of a Mandela effect. But I could swear blind when I was little. I remember going to somebody's house and they had Godzilla 2 on VHS. I remember that. Apparently it's a Mandela effect thing, but I remember that there being a Godzilla 2. Now, I have done some research and there's a potentiality that I'm wrong, that what I remember was potentially the spin-off TV show of this movie. But I really do remember a Godzilla 2. I don't know why. I just do. But apparently that never happened and it didn't exist. But again, that's just all part of the fun and part of the interest. And yeah, I just love it. I think it's great. I think Matthew Broderick is just, he's one of his better roles, to be honest. So yeah, today I'm going to be talking about Godzilla, and I don't care if people don't like it. I do, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So I have the DVD here in front of me. On the front, it says, from the creators of Independence Day, Godzilla. Now, I will admit, and this is something I will agree on with everybody else, the cover is clever, but at the same stage, it feels a bit B-movie. Because what I've got on the front cover of this disc is Godzilla in green, which again looks absolutely brilliant. But then if you pan down, you just see a giant foot. And I get it. I get the point. Godzilla, he's big, he's huge, he's too big to fit on the poster. Okay, I get the iconography, I get the idea, I get the concept. But the problem is when you look at it and you stare at it for a bit, you sit there and kind of think, it looks superimposed. It looks like it's been copied and pasted, it's been put on there. It doesn't look right. It doesn't. It looks a bit fuzzy around the edges, you know. And then you've got the Apache helicopters around, which again, cool idea, cool effect. Again, they look tiny next to Godzilla's foot as they fly around. And then you've got some people on the floor running away. Two people, both doing the same sort of falling over, running motion. You've got Humvees. You've got obviously a New York taxi because you've got to have that because it show look it's set in New York. But it I don't know, the poster. It when you look at it for too long, you sit there and you start pointing things out and go, it feels a bit B-movie. If you just cover the whole Godzilla logo, you just look at it for what it is, you think, this feels like one of them cheapy sort of movies. But again, or maybe that's the idea. Maybe the idea is the fact of, Godzilla was a very sort of small sort of thing, and now we're bringing it to Hollywood, and this is kind of an homage to that. Again, I don't really know. But that's the cover. Anyway, we flip it over, and this is the important part. So it goes, monstrously entertaining by the Daily Star. Then the synopsis. So, in the steamy jungles of the South Pacific, an enormous creature is created by nuclear fallout. Lost for decades, the power and the fury of the world's largest monster are about to be unleashed. He's the most spectacular creature in cinematic history. With a foot the size of a bus, a body as tall as London's Big Ben, and strength and agility the likes of which the world has never seen, the creators of Independence Day are proud to unleash the ultimate in monster horror, Godzilla, starring Matthew Broderick, Jean Reno, Hank Azaria. It's true what they say, size does matter. And that is your synopsis for this movie. The back seems all right. It still feels a bit sort of cheesy, sort of B movie. But the back is all right. But it's when you look at that front poster, you're like, I can see where people are coming from. But that's neither here nor there. I still love the movie. I just wanted to mention it because it was something that I noticed as I was getting ready to record. I was sitting down looking at the cover. I was like, the more you look at it, the more cheap it looks. So I'm not going to look at it anymore because it's going to ruin things. So I'm going to throw it over there and I'm going to carry on. Anyway, let's talk about the cast of this movie. So the cast are as follows. So, as I mentioned, you've got Matthew Broderick as Dr. Nico Tapalopoulos, Jean Reno as Philip Roche, Maria Pillio as Audrey, Hank Azaria as Victor, Kevin Dunn as Colonel Hicks, Michael Lena as Mayor Albert, Harry Shea as Charles Chapman, Abriella Field as Lucy Patoli, Vicky Lewis as Dr. Elswith Chapman, Doug Savant as Sergeant O'Neill, Malcolm Dinar as Dr. Mendel Craven, and Philip Bergonron as Jean-Claude. And that is your cast. I find it also funny that this is another John Reno movie that I'm looking at this year because obviously I did Leon the Professional at the beginning of the year and now I'm doing this one. But you know, it's one of those happy coincidences that I'm happy to have because John Reno is a brilliant actor, and to be honest, he's brilliant in this movie. And I just wish he had more to do in the film. That's another thing that I want to mention. But again, that's neither here nor there. As for the developments, there's a lot to talk about in the developments. So I'm going to have a quick, sort of tiny break, have a bit of a drink of water, and then we'll come back and talk about the development of this movie. So I'll see you in a second. And I'm back. So, as for the development, American film producer and distributor Henry G. Saperstein, who had co-produced and distributed past Godzilla films for the American market through his studio UPA, received permission from Toho Co., the owners of the Godzilla franchise, to pitch a new Godzilla film to Hollywood studios, stating, "For 10 years I pressured Toho to make one in America, and finally they agreed." Saperstein initially met with Sony Pictures producers Cary Woods and Robert N. Fried for discussions regarding a live-action Mr. Magoo film, but the discussions led to the availability of the rights to Godzilla. Interested, Woods and Fried proposed the idea to Columbia Pictures, which had previously handled the North American release of Toho's Mothra, but were initially rejected. Woods stated, "We pitched the idea to Columbia, and they passed outright. Their response was that they found it had the potential for camp. The two sides also tried to pitch the idea to TriStar Pictures, but were also shot down. Freud stated TriStar did not originally pass on the project. The people who were running the studio at that particular time may not have seen commercial potential there, may not have thought that it would make a great film. Taking advice from his wife, Woods instead went over the executive's head and produced the idea to Peter Guber, the then chairman of the board and CEO of Sony Pictures. Guber became enthusiastic about the idea, seeing Godzilla as an international brand, and set the film up at TriStar. Woods recalled, Peter got it. He saw the movie in his head. He was like, Godzilla, the fire-breathing monster. Yes, which is kind of ironic because he doesn't breathe fire in this movie. Anyway, TriStar Vice Chairman Ken Lemberger was sent to Tokyo to oversee the deal in obtaining the Godzilla rights from Toho in mid-1992. Sony's initial offer included a $300,000 to $400,000 advance payment with an annual leasing fee for the Godzilla character, as well as production bonuses, executive distribution and merchandising rights for Japan, a profit percentage from international ticket sales and merchandising, usage rights to some of the monsters from the first 15 Godzilla films, and allow Toho to continue producing domestic Godzilla films while TriStar developed their film. Subsequently, Toho sent Sony a document of rules on how to treat Godzilla. Robert Freud stated, they even sent me a 4-page single-space memo describing the physical requirements the Godzilla in our film had to have. They were very protective, which of course, it's their baby. Of course they was. In October 1992, TriStar formally announced their acquisition of the rights to Godzilla from Toho to produce a trilogy of Godzilla films, with the promise of remaining true to the original series, cautioning against nuclear weapons and runaway technology, which again is incredibly ironic because this movie starts with nuclear weapons and they do run away from it very much. Anyway, I still love it. After TriStar's announcement, many of the original Godzilla filmmakers expressed support for the film. Haruo Nakajima, who portrayed Godzilla from 1954 to 1972, stated, I'm pleased. I hope that a competition will spring up between Toho and TriStar. Koichi, I'm sorry if I mispronounce this, Kawakatia, special effects director for the Godzilla film, stated, I have great expectations. I'm looking forward to seeing it, not only because I direct special effects for Godzilla films, but also because I am a movie fan. Teruoshi Nakono, special effects director of the late Showa Godzilla film, stated, I'm pleased that a new approach will be taken. And Ishiro Honda, director of various Showa Godzilla films, stated, it will probably be much more interesting than the ones currently being produced in Japan. In 1994, Jan de Bont became attached to direct and began pre-production of the film for a 1996 summer release. De Bont's Godzilla would have discarded the character's atomic origins and replaced it with one wherein Godzilla is an artificial creation constructed by Atlanteans to defeat humanity against a shape-shifting extraterrestrial monster called the Gyphon. Stan Wilson and his company were employed to do the effects for the film. Winston's crafted sculptures of Godzilla and the Gryphon. Dimont later left the project in December 1994 after TriStar refused to approve his budget of $100 to $120 million. He would later go on to direct Twister, which I love, and Speed 2 Cruise Control. Clive Barker and Tim Burton were also in talks to potentially direct. Now, this is where it kind of gets a little bit interesting. So you get Emmerich and Devlin. So prior to the release of Independence Day, this is where these guys come into it. Director Roland Emmerich and producer Dean Devlin signed on to the project in May 1996 under the condition that they would be able to handle the film their way. Devlin stated, I told Sony that I would do the film, but on my own terms, with Godzilla as a fast-moving animal out of nature rather than some strange kind of creature. Emmerich and Devlin were the first filmmakers approached by then TriStar executive Chris Lee to do Godzilla, but initially turned the offer down. Devlin stated, both of us thought it was a dopey idea the first time we talked. When Chris came back to us, we still thought it was a dopey idea. Despite praising Elliott and Rossio's script, Emmerich discarded it, stating it had some really cool things in it, but it is something I never would have done. The last half was like watching two creatures go at it. I simply don't like that. Emmerich instead decided to develop new ideas from scratch, stating, I didn't want to make the original Godzilla. I wanted nothing to do with it. I wanted to make my own. We took part of the original movie's basic storyline in that the creature becomes created by radiation and it becomes a big challenge, but that's all we took. Then we asked ourselves what we would do today with a monster movie and a story like that. We forgot everything about the original Godzilla right there. This is where I'm going to stop things for a moment. There is a line that should never be crossed when it comes to taking an idea. We're taking a already established intellectual property. You see it with books, you see it with movies, you see it with video games, right? Best example, where you've got Game of Thrones or The Boys. You've got these two things that are already established. One's a really, really popular comic book story, and one's a very, very popular book series, right? You have the original idea and you have subverting expectations. You have this whole sort of interpretation, and the reason I bring them up is this idea that, again, we'll take Game of Thrones. Granted, George R.R. Martin hasn't finished the series and he still hasn't yet as a record, and he probably never will. But you had the show that was following the story and the books. It was brilliant. Then when they stopped following it, a lot of things started to fall off, and then you got the ending season, which was all right, but it wasn't brilliant. And it's this whole thing of subverting expectations, and it was creators, the people behind that movie, wanting to leave their own mark on it. And that's the reason why I bring that up and why I use that as an example, is the fact of you always have somebody who goes, I want to do it my way. I want to leave my mark on it. And sometimes that works. Other times I'm sat here going, well, no, give the audience what they want. Give the audience, what they should get. Not what, I want to leave my mark on the franchise. Well, no, I get that. But sometimes it's best to kind of give the audience what they want. I.e., if you're going to do a Godzilla movie and you're going to have the heritage that comes with Godzilla, at least instead of going, we forgot everything about the original Godzilla right there, and then do your own thing. Instead of doing that, be like, look, take what people loved about the original Godzilla, but just modernize it. All you've got to do is change the body and the badge. Keep everything else, the body and the badge. Instead, like Saab, again, this is going to be a weird analogy, like the car maker Saab, that all they had to do was change the body and the badge. They ended up changing the whole car, and it was nothing like the original, and it cost way more money than it should have. Again, a weird analogy, and if you're interested in cars and you're interested in Top Gear, you'll get that reference. Otherwise, you won't. But it's a good thing. It's the fact of take what's there. All you need to do is change the body and the badge. Apart from that, everything stays the same. But they didn't. I went a bit of a rant there. I do apologize. But again, it's a whole thing of taking what came with the heritage of Godzilla, but instead, being like, oh no, we're going to do our own thing. That's where it kind of gets a little bit worrying. And again, I've been seeing this movie multiple times. I know what they ended up doing, but I just wanted to sort of mention that. Anyway, as for the creature design, again, something that's really, really interesting. So Emmerich decided to completely reinvent Godzilla's design because he thought the original Toho design didn't make sense. Emmerich also discarded the previous design approved by Jean de Bont, stating, I saw the creature that they designed for TriStar's first attempt. Jean de Bont created a Godzilla that was very close to the original, but it was not right because today we couldn't do it like that. Patrick Tatopoulos was hired by Emmerich to design Godzilla. According to Tatopoulos, the only specific instructions Emmerich gave him was that it should be able to run incredibly fast. Godzilla, originally conceived as a robust, erect, standing, plantigrade reptilian sea monster, was reimagined by Tatopoulos as a lean, digigrate, bipedal, iguana-like creature that stood with its back legs and tail parallel to the ground. Godzilla's color scheme was designed to reflect and blend in with the urban environment. At one point, it was planned to use motion capture from a human to create the movements of the computer-generated Godzilla, but it ended up looking too much like a human in a suit, which again is what the original Godzilla is. So you can see they're moving further and further away of what the whole idea is. Tatopoulos thought the designs that Ricardo Delgado and Cash McCreely and Joe Osco provided for John DeBont, took the design in a wrong approach, stating what they did, which was a mistake in my mind, was rather than going in a new direction, they tried to alter and make the old one better. And when you do that, first of all, I think it's very disrespectful. It's more disrespectful for me to alter something existing than to take a new, fresh direction. Totopoulos took inspiration from the design of Shere Khan, used in Disney's version of The Jungle Book in terms of Godzilla's chin, stating, one of the inspiration was a character I loved as a kid, the tiger in The Jungle Book, Shere Khan. He had this great chin thing, and I always loved it. He looked scary, evil, but you respected him. I thought, let's try to give him a chin, which again is a weird thing to say for Godzilla, but anyway, let's try to give him a chin. And I felt it still looked realistic, but he had this different thing that you hadn't seen before. Totopoulos created 4 concept art pieces and a 2-foot tall matinee for a meeting with Toho. Totopoulos and Emmerich attended the meeting to pitch their Godzilla to then Toho chairman Isao Matsukawa, Godzilla film producer Shogo Tomiyama, and Godzilla special effects director Koshi Kawatika. They unveiled Totopoulos' artwork and mannequin, and the Toho trio remained silent for a few minutes. Emmerich recalled, they were speechless. They stared at it, and they were silent for a couple minutes. Then they said, could you come back tomorrow? Oh God, that don't sound good. I thought for sure we didn't have the movie then. Tomiyama later recalled that it was so different. We realized we couldn't make small adjustments. That left the major question of whether to approve it or not. Even though Tomiyama was not allowed to remove the artwork and mannequin from the studio premises, Tomiyama visited Godzilla producer and creator Tomoyuki Tanaka, whose failing health prevented him from attending the meeting, to explain Totopoulos' design, stating, I told him it's similar to Carl Lewis with long legs and it runs fast. The following morning, Matazuka approved the design, stating that Totopoulos kept the spirit of Godzilla. Well, I guess if the original creator, signs off on it, then, so should we. But again, it's one of those things of like, ugh, it seems like you're moving away there, Chief. Anyway, as for writing, so despite receiving approval from Toho, TriStar had yet to greenlight the film. Emmerich and Devlin wrote the script on spec with the condition that the screenplay would return to the filmmakers if the studio did not immediately approve it. Emmerich and Devlin wrote the first draft in 5.5 weeks at Emmerich's vacation house in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. Emmerich and Devlin decided to abandon the Atlantis origin established in Elliot and Rossio's script in favor of the radiation origin established in the Toho films. Okay, you're on the right track again. Devlin stated, in some of the early drafts of the script by others, they had Godzilla being an alien planted here. What Japan had originally come up with regarding nuclear radiation, you can't abandon that. It's too important to what Godzilla is all about. Again, I agree. Again, lads, you're on the right track. Emmerich and Devlin also decided to treat their Godzilla more animal-like than monster. Totopoulos stated, we were creating an animal. We weren't creating a monster. Emmerich and Devlin also decided to give their Godzilla the ability to burrow underground. Devlin stated, we discovered that certain kinds of lizards can burrow, so we decided to give him that capability. Chameleon-like skin change was also considered but abandoned later during production. Emmerich and Devlin also abandoned Godzilla's iconic atomic breath in favor of a power breath. Is it a power breath, though? Not really. Where their Godzilla would simply blow objects away by exhaling a strong wind-like breath. However, news of the power breath leaked before the film's release, which outraged fans and forced Emmerich and Devlin to make last-minute changes on scenes involving the power breath. Effects supervisor Volker Engel stated, Dean and Roland wanted this monster to retain a certain menace and credibility, but Godzilla's breath is something everyone expects to see at some point. So they came up with instances in which you would see something like the old breath, but with a kind of logic applied to it. We make the assumption that something in his breath, when it comes in contact with flame, causes combustion ignition. So you get this flamethrower effect, which causes everything to ignite. As a way to make their Godzilla a threat to mankind, Emmerich and Devlin also gave their Godzilla the ability to lay hundreds of eggs via, again, most reptiles, and rapidly spawn offspring that could spawn offspring of their own and quickly overrun the planet. The first draft was submitted to Sony on December the 19th, 1996. Then President of Sony Pictures, John Carley, forwarded the script to Bob Levin of marketing to brainstorm marketing ideas. So, as for pre-production, so TriStar greenlit the film soon after Emmerich and Devlin's completion of the first draft, bestowing completion creative freedom to write, produce, and direct on the filmmakers. While the studio managed financing, distribution, and merchandising deals, the deal also enabled Emmerich and Devlin to receive 50% first dollar gross on the film, while the original producers, Kerry Woods and Robert Fried, would be given executive producer credits. Instead of employing Digital Domain as John DeBont planned for his Godzilla, Emmerich and Devlin decided to use their own effects team, such as visual effects division Centropolis Effects, as the lead effects vendor. Volker Engel as the film's visual effects supervisor, Joe Viscoki as miniature effects supervisor, and Clay Pinley as mechanical effects supervisor, and William Fay as executive producer of the team. Viewpoint Data Labs created a digital model of Godzilla, nicknamed Fred, for scenes that required a digital rendition of the monster for scenes that required practical effects. Totopolis Studio created a 6-scale animatronic model of Godzilla's upper body, as well as a 24th scale Godzilla suit donned by stuntman Kurt Carley. The filmmakers favoured CG over practical effects, and as a result, the final film featured 400 digital shots, 185 of which featured Godzilla, and only 24 practical effects used in the final film. Right, that is what I've got to say for production. 2 things I want to add. There are many things I want to mention, but it'll take me too long to mention them all. So I'm going to mention 2 things. I'm glad, even though they went off track, I'm glad they got back on track. And I'm glad they got not just permission, but the go-ahead from the original creators, which is good. One thing I kind of disagree with, they took away the whole atomic breath. Now, when I was younger, when I watched these movies, I never realized that was the thing that Godzilla could do. It's not until it became a lot later that I watched other Godzilla movies that I realized that atomic breath, it was central to the character. It was the whole point. Well, not the whole point, but one of the big things that this character could do, right? So when I watched the movie again as an adult, and knowing that, I know it's not there, it's a little bit of a bummer. And then you start to notice where he should have done atomic breath, but instead he does this whole sort of power breath, which he doesn't breathe fire. He just kind of just, like, again, there is a fire and he breathes the fire and makes it like a flamethrower, right? I don't know how best to explain it. So there's that. So, and it's one of those where they wanted to get away from man in a suit, which again, I get that. But again, even if they did man in a suit, they could have done practical effects. They could have done models. There is amazing movies out there that are shot a lot on models. Star Wars, Blade Runner, to name 2 of the best. They use a lot of models. But they look good. They look to scale. They're incredible. So those moments when, Godzilla's going through, New York, and he's going between the buildings and all that, right? You could have done models instead of doing CGI with the having the Apache go through them and having it all CGI. You could have done it where it was all models, and it would have looked brilliant. And yeah. So there are small things here and there where I'm like, oh, okay, you got off track, then you got on track, then you jumped off the track, and then you basically railroaded a different one, and you went a different way, and then you came back. So it's a lot of sort of wishy-washy here, there, and everywhere. But I still love this movie. I still have hope. I still have faith because, again, I do enjoy it. So it's going to be interesting reading all those production notes and knowing that they were very wishy-washy. And they changed certain things. And going into this movie that I love with the reviewer hat on. So before I'm watching it as a fan, now I'm going to put the reviewer hat on and sort of experience it for that. It's going to be interesting. So I am kind of excited. And to be honest, this movie's a PG. I always thought it was a 12, to be honest. I've always forgot that it was a PG. Yeah, it's a PG. Oh, either way. I'm going to go off now and watch Godzilla. And then when we come back, we'll talk about first impressions, story, production, overall, trivia, and all that jazz. So I'll see you all in a minute. welcome back, everyone. So, I've now watched Godzilla 98. That's what I'm going to call it because it's easier. Because whenever you type into Google Godzilla, you always get like, the original Godzilla. Then you get up to the like 2006, 2017, 2016, the 2022 or whatever one that came out with like Godzilla versus King Kong and all that. So I'm just going to call him Godzilla 98 because it's easier. So I've just finished watching this movie. And I'll be honest with you, I still love and enjoy it. Even though going into it, yes, knowing what I know now, where like they was like, no, we're going to do our own thing. We're going to change this. We're going to change that. We're going to get rid of the atomic breath. We're going to make him more like a iguana. We're going to kind of get rid of the whole idea of him being this giant monster. He's just going to be very quick. He's not going to be a man in a suit. Basically all the red flags are blaring like, sort of like, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. Even though, that being said, let's be honest with you, it's a popcorn flick. And that's what it is. When you go into a cinema, you go watch a popcorn flicky movie, it's not going to be great. It's going to have brilliant set pieces, a lot of great action, a lot of sort of like, oh my God, wow, that's cinema sort of moments. But in terms of like story and stuff like that, no, not really. It's not going to be brilliant. And that's kind of the emphasis of this movie, really, is the fact that they changed a lot of things. They westernized it. They made it very, very American. And I know it's a weird thing to say, but as I was watching this, I could just sit there and be like, it's a very American movie. Because it is. It's very much like the movies of the time. Whenever you watch any movie that came out during like the 90s, early 2000s, they all have that look and that feel of them. They feel very Americanized. So when you watch this, again, you've got the big military presence. You got all the Humvees everywhere. You got all the grunts running around. You've got Godzilla running around Manhattan, and you've got the Apache helicopters going interweaving through the buildings. They're firing off rockets. They blew up the Chrysler building. It's popcorny American slop. But you know what? I don't mean that as a bad thing. It's a good thing because I still enjoy it. I was still, even though this movie's about almost 3 hours long, about 2 hours and 40 minutes long, even though it doesn't get boring. It never gets uninteresting. There's never a moment where I'm sitting there thinking, oh God, this is crap, or oh God, I'm bored. Even though I've seen it multiple times, there's never that moment. There's never that moment where like I'm just bored. There's always that thing of, oh, I can't wait to what comes next. I can't wait to see Godzilla again. I can't wait to see what happens next. I'm excited, and I've seen this movie multiple times, and I'm still like, because what I love about this movie, what they really do really, really well, is they don't show you the monster straight away. They could easily make this, again, your standard American movie was like, oh, here's Godzilla, and you see him every single time throughout this movie. No, they really spend the time being like building up to it. Building up to the fact of you'll see a bit of foot, you'll see a claw marks, and as you're going in, you see a bit more of it. You see a bit more of the leg. You see as he's coming into the Manhattan Bay, you see a little bit of his back, of his sort of fins or whatever they're called, and then he comes up out of the ocean. And you see a little bit, and then it's very much the fact of you see a bit of tail. Like it's building up to suspense. And I've said this before about monster movies. Really, it's the fact of you've got to keep the audience engaged. If you give them everything they want at the beginning, i.e. showing the monster straight away, then there's nothing to be excited for. You've got to preheat the oven before you stick in the turkey. You know what I mean? You've really got to get people in the mood, get them ready, get them excited for what's going to come. So when you do eventually show them Godzilla, it's like, oh my God. And then you can do the action. Because again, for a movie this long, you have to. You can't just be like, here's Godzilla, and then action happens. It's like, okay, well, we've had all the action. We've seen Godzilla. Then what? You know what I mean? You've already reached the climax. People are like, oh my God. And they're nothing. So the the cleverness of them not showing you Godzilla and only giving you fuzzy footage or people's accounts and just footprints in the dirt until you actually see a bit of foot, a bit more of the body, a bit of tail, that sort of thing. It all builds up to when you finally do see Godzilla, you're like, oh my God, this thing's huge. This thing's incredible. Now, admittedly, and we'll talk about the design of Godzilla a little bit later, even though I'm somewhat against them not using practical effects, because them using practical effects would have been a huge boon to this movie, because there are certain shots and certain scenes where you could tell the CGI is a bit dated and it doesn't look great. And there's other parts where he's like, okay, this is where you could have done practical. This is where you could have done a lot more and it would have been better. But again, we'll sort of get there when we talk about sort of the design of Godzilla. But yeah, still, I enjoy it. it's not a 10 out of 10. It's not a 5-star, but for me, I'd say 4.5, like 3.5, 4 star. It's a lot of fun. It's a popcorn flick. It's a movie you can stick on and just watch and devour. And after it's done, then you watch something else. And I don't mean that as a negative thing. It's just a fact of, yeah, it's a very sort of popcorn flicky movie, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. There really, really isn't. And I don't get the hate. I don't. I enjoyed it. I thought it was fantastic. As for the story, so it's kind of funny. As I was watching this, all the times I've seen it, I never really paid that much attention to the fact of as to why Jean Reno, what Rush, his character, why his character was there. I just was like, he disappeared, and it never occurred to me the reason as to why. I know it sounds really silly to say. The reason that him and like the French Secret Service are there is because they're trying to cover up what they did, which I think is really, really clever. Because if you know your history of atomic testing and nuclear weapons, I think the British, we detonated ours down by Australia, down by there. The Americans did it around the atoll. There's a whole island called that. Well, I say it's an island anymore. Really, there's not much left of it. But there was an island called the Bikini Atoll, and the Americans basically detonated one of the largest, I think, nuclear or atomic weapons ever there. I think it was a hydrogen bomb. I can't remember. But they detonated the biggest one, and it decimated this small island to the point where there was hardly anything left, to be honest. And the place is highly irradiated, and the people that live there were like, look, we'll do what I'll do, and then you can come back. And they've never been allowed to go back because it's just too hardly irradiated. The French did it as well around the French Polynesian area. The Russians did it. Basically everybody who basically had a nuke tested it somewhere in the ocean. But I like how they use the French because I find it funny how it's a fact of, who should we choose? Oh, we can't really choose the Russians, and we can't choose these guys because we don't want to upset anybody. So who best to choose? We will choose the French because the French won't mind about using them as not the bad guys, but like using them as kind of like, well, we don't want to say it's the Americans, so we'll just blame the French, which I always found that was kind of funny because they're not going to say anything. So you have these French sort of scientists, that they're detonating nuclear weapons, and there's an iguana on this island around sort of French Polynesia, and it's laid eggs. All of a sudden, bomb goes off. It's huge catastrophe, and then all you left is a shot of I'm guessing the mother iguana. She's dead. All the other eggs are destroyed, and there's one egg left, and that's obviously been affected by the amount of radiation. And that's what brings in, obviously, Jean Reno's character, Roach, and everything else. And I like that. I like it, because this is where it really kind of stems from when you're in Godzilla, because Godzilla came not long after the end of the sort of Second World War. And what you've got to remember at this point in time, the radiation and atomic weapons, nuclear weapons, was very real to them. The effects of what radiation does to people, what the radiation does to the environment, to cities and places and that sort of thing. It was very real to them because they're the only people that has ever had one dropped on them. So it was still in very much in the mind's eye. So when it came to this idea of Godzilla and how it affects the environment, that's really with the origins for it. So, to kind of keep that origins is fair and very faithful to the idea of the character of Godzilla, to be honest, which again I really, really loved. And then as it moves on and Godzilla attacks a boat, and then as he attacks a boat, he's making his way through Tahiti, and you see these big marks in the ground, big footprints, and so on. I love that. Again, bringing in Matthew Broderick, Mr. Nico Totopoulos, which again I always struggle to say his name, but I think I said it right that time. Bringing in Nick Totopoulos, and he is is the worm guy. He's kind of just like he's in Chernobyl. He's looking at the effects of radiation on worms and things like that. And again, that's a true thing as well. If you look into it and do your research, there's a lot of things in the Chernobyl area in Pripyat that are mutated or changed. There is, for example, the best example I can give you, there is a type of frog in and around the Pripyat area, and originally it was green. It was like the same color of the environment, but over the huge doses of radiation that these frogs are getting, all these frogs have now turned black, and that evolution we can see in real time, in a very short amount of period, that evolution stepped in, and a way to protect these frogs. I don't know how it does, but a way to protect these frogs and the amount of radiation they're getting is their skin is now black, and that is shown. And there's other things as well, like the animals, the dogs, the creatures, the insects are bigger and things like that. So it just goes to show that radiation does have a huge effect, especially over a long period of time, how it can change and mutate things. It's not just science fiction, it's a real science. It's a real thing. Where was I going with that? I don't know where I was going with that. I just went a bit of a tangent. But the point is, I like how they kept it. They kept that with all the things they changed. They kept that because again, it makes sense. And then when he gets to Manhattan, that I find interesting as well, because again, you could sit there as a very American thing, a very sort of like, oh, where should we put them? Oh, let's put them in the biggest city in America. Let's stick him in New York or stick him in Manhattan Island, which to be honest sounds like a very sort of like big-headed sort of America, yeah, sort of thing. But when you actually think about it, it kind of makes sense, to be honest, because when you look at a map of Manhattan, it's all skyscrapers, it's all buildings, it's all big, huge big city sort of tower blocks and that sort of thing. It makes sense where you'd have a giant creature who would try to live and hide in there, especially how they made this Godzilla able to burrow. And obviously New York is full of networks and subways as well. So it would make sense that where would it hide if it can't go around? It would, bury itself underground. And again, this is the thing about this movie. There are clever things that they do that you can sit there and go, it is a bit sort of like you shouldn't have changed it, but the same stage of like clever. And I was thinking as I was watching this movie that this movie probably would have done better and probably would have had a better response by people if it wasn't a Godzilla movie. If this was I don't know, let's for example, let's call it The Escape of Subject Zero or something like that. It was a brand new franchise. It was a brand new idea. It was a brand new concept. It was something completely brand new. Nothing to do with Godzilla. Nothing to do with anything like that. And it was just the fact of this creature had been tested on in this research facility, being exposed to radiation. It got really, really big. It escaped. The Americans and the military were trying to track it. They tracked it all the way down to New York, and it's loose in New York, and it's doing things that it shouldn't be able to do. It's incredibly fast. It can shoot shockwaves or breaths, or maybe you can get rid of that, to be honest, because they hardly use it in this movie. It shoots, get rid of the nuclear blast. It's really fast. It's agile. Even for its big size, it's able to camouflage, or it's able to turn off its heat signature so it can go cold, so it can't be shot by rockets, things like that. If they just made a movie like that, with just a giant monster loose on New York, nothing to do with Godzilla. Granted, I can still imagine people would probably sit there and go, this feels like a bit of a Godzilla ripoff. Again, that would probably still happen as it would do, because again, whenever you get giant monster movies, that always comes up, which is fine. But making it its own thing, I think people would have enjoyed it a bit more and would have appreciated it a bit more, because they don't have the original idea and concept of Godzilla going into it. There's no sort of like, I know what Godzilla is, and that's not what Godzilla is. There's none of that, because it's nothing to do with it, So I think it would have done better. And again, there are a few moments in this where you still watching, you think, oh, okay, that's cool, that's original. Well, like the whole borrowing. Or I love the bit where the Apache helicopters are chasing it around, and and they try to shoot it, and they get a lock on it, and they fire. It moves out the way. They hit the Chrysler Building, which is a great shot, by the way. And he goes, oh, damn it, soldier, you told me you had a lock on him. And he said, well, he's cold, sir. The buildings around him are hot. That could have been a cool thing of like, oh, yeah, he can camouflage, or he can turn off his heat signature. So again, it keeps the action, but also gives like, okay, we've got to find new ways of tracking this thing. We've got to find new ways of finding this thing, because every time, at every turn, it's getting us, and show how clever it is. I'm basically rewriting a different movie at this stage. I'm not even talking about the idea of Godzilla, because it isn't Godzilla. Because it isn't. It doesn't have atomic breath, and it isn't like a Godzilla. It is a Godzilla light. You know what I mean? It's like you got Bud and then you got Bud Light. It's beer, but you know what I mean? It's over there to the side. And not to sort of make fun of anybody that drinks Bud Light, but again, you know what I mean? Like, it's Bud Light. It's there, but it's not really taken as serious as normal sort of Budweiser. again, I'll keep going on tangents. I'm sorry. I think it was when you talk about a movie like this, even though it's like 2 hours long, you realize the fact of it is just a giant monster movie. So you haven't really got a lot to say other than the fact of, yeah, it was all right. It was it was good. I do like I do like the whole thing with the Jean Reno, his character as Philip Roach, and how him and his people are tracking it and doing bugs. That's really cool. Too much. My favorite part of this movie, surprisingly, and again, it was when I was younger, and it was now. My favorite part of this movie was when they were in Madison Square Garden. Was when they, weren't like the beginning of the movie. You try to figure out what this creature is. That's interesting. The middle part where they feed it, which is cool. And then you get that really annoying part where the general's like, "Oh God, we've lost comms. He must be attacking. Have you got any proof of that?" No, but he must be because we've lost comms. So fire everything. And we're like, well, no. But again, that's your sort of stereotypical American general. Oh, we've lost contact. Everything must have gone bad. That's it. I've been waiting to do this the whole movie. Where's the big red button? Do you have any reason to press that button, sir? Not really. I just wanted to press it. I literally had a hard on to press this button this whole movie. And now I've got to give it a reason to do it because I don't know what's going on. So I'm going to press this button. I don't know what this button does, but I know it sends missiles. And that's what he does. He just presses the big button, launch the missiles now, and they attack, and then it all starts up again. And it's very much, again, it's funny. It reminded me of the Iron Giant, where you have Mansley and you have the general trying to be like, look, calm down. Like Hogarth's like, don't shoot, it's all fine. And you got Mansley, he's freaking out, and he's like, launch the missiles now. And he's like, that missile's targeted the giant's current position. Where's the giant, Mansley? And he's like, oh, and he's like, oh, we can duck and cover. He's like, there's no way to survive this. We're all gonna die. For our country. And then he's like, screw our country, I want to live. And he tries to go off. And it's that thing of like, well, you finally managed to get it calm. And then at one stage, the general was like, oh, launch, attack, and fire everything. And they all obviously fire because it's their general. They're going to listen to him. They think he knows things that they don't know, which he doesn't. And it starts up again. And again, admittedly, Godzilla. The thing is with this Godzilla is the fact of it's not evil. It's not cruel. It's not malicious. It's not trying to murder and kill everybody. It is literally. It's pregnant. It's migrated. It's looking for food. It's found. It builds a nest, and it just wants to feed its young. It's basically doing what any other animal does. It migrates to somewhere warmer, somewhere different, somewhere more habitable for where it can lay its eggs. It collects foods, builds a nest, lays the eggs, whatever. Once the kids are born, feeds the kids and lives. Now, granted, what does that mean in terms of humans? Not good, because these things aren't like tiny little insects. These things are huge. When they're born, they're as big as raptors. And if they're going to get as big as a mum, we're screwed, especially if they're meat eaters and things like that. Now, admittedly, we don't entirely know that. For all we know, yes, we don't want giant creatures running around, and it would be a bit difficult, living with humans. But for all we know, after all this, all the creatures can go back in the ocean, go really, really deep in the ocean, go and live on an island somewhere. Again, more than likely, probably not. But we don't know that. And it's just that thing of like, it's just very much the humans of like, oh, they're doing a thing. I don't like that thing. Let's go kill them. And it does at the end of the movie. I always feel sad at the end of this movie. Again, it's very much like King Kong, where it's just like, well, you've killed the beast, but was it the right thing to do? And obviously, the movie frames it as the right thing to do because we find out the fact of yes, they are meat eaters and they will spread. But at the time, we didn't know that. But it does make me feel sad because it's just a creature. It's just a creature that wanted to nest and live. That's all it wanted to. It was instincts. That's all it was. It was just doing instincts. It wasn't trying to hurt anybody. It wasn't trying to kill anybody. It was defending itself for majority of the movie. But obviously, because Godzilla is meant to be the bad guy, the big monster, it's framed as that. I don't know. Maybe I just love animals, and maybe that I'm just a bit soppy. But I always get a bit sad at the end of this movie. It's like, oh God. And when you've got Matthew Broderick, Nick, he's going towards Godzilla, and it's just been bombed by like huge loads of Tomahawk missiles. And it's there, it's breathing, it's you can hear its heartbeats very loud, like thump, thump, thump. And then you just hear slowly this thumping start to slow down, and eventually it's thump, thump. It's slowing down, and eventually it's just thumping it. That's it, and then the eyes close. And it's that very much like you can see as Matthew's kind of looking at it, it's very much like it's beauty that killed the beast sort of thing. It's like, oh, he just wanted to live. But obviously, I'll get onto that because I've kind of jumped ahead. I was talking about my favorite part of the movie, and I went into this other stuff. Anyway, going back to that, my favorite part of the movie, and it always has been, is the part where they're in Madison Square Gardens, like the end of the movie, where it feels very much kind of like Jurassic Park, where they're being hunted by raptors. I don't know if that was done intentionally, but it does feel like that. And again, as somebody who, again, this was made in 1998. I was just born this year, so I didn't watch it when it came out. I watched it later, and discovering Jurassic Park, and then obviously discovering this movie and stuff like that, there was very much similarities. So for a young brain like me, they were very similar, and I always liked these sort of scenes. So they follow the creature down into the sewers. Towards Madison Square Garden, they find all these eggs. These eggs start hatching, and they start hunting them because, again, their first instinct as children is, we've got to eat, we've got to find food. And obviously the mum had given loads of fish, but that wasn't enough. It was a fact of, oh, there's fish here, but there's also something over here that smells like fish, that's running around wriggling. That's my food. So obviously they're just going to chase it. They chase him around, and I love this where you've got them chasing, and they're killing off Philip Roche's team. Like, you've got Jean-Claude, Jean-Pierre, Jean-Philippe. There was another one, Jean-Luc. So I love how you've got all these different. They've all got Jean. I always imagine that the reason that each one of them is called Jean something is because it was just a code name. Jean-Philippe, Jean-Luc, Jean-Pierre, Jean-Claude. Like, that was just a code name for them. Which I find that. So all of Philip Roche's teams is killed, and all that's left is like Nico, Roche, Victor, Animal, played by Hank Azaria, and Audrey, and they're filming it, and they're like, look, if the army's looking at this, Madison Square Garden, this is where they are, this is the nest, you've got to take them out because they're born pregnant. And so it won't take them long to get to maturity, to start having babies of their own. And then this cycle's just going to continue. And within a few days, weeks, months, they're going to take over all of the United States and the rest of the world, and they can swim. So it won't take them long to get to the rest of it. So we've got an opportunity now to stop it. And I love the bit where as they're running, you can tell that, Matthew Broderick's character, Nico, he's still interested. He's still a scientist. He's like, you can tell that he knows they have to kill them, but he doesn't want to because he's fascinated in them. So there's many moments where he stops and he stares at them, and they're having to pull him back, like, come on. And I love this bit. And again, it's done purely for popcorn, flicky. But there's a moment where, as Nick, Matthew Broderick's character, as he's running, he tosses some basketballs onto the floor, and he busts some gumballs on the floor. So as he runs, he turns around, the camera pans back, and you've got all of these little baby-like raptor Godzillas just tripping and falling as you've got loads of loads of gumballs and basketballs just like go with them. They just fly with them. It's kind of very sort of like slapstick, very comedy, where they just slide. And he takes them out to stand and observe them and to watch them. And he runs off, and that's when you get that scene where he runs down. He's like, okay, I've stopped them. It's all good. And then he realizes, oh no, there's more of them. There's lots more of them at the door. And then obviously they get through that. And I love the bit where, like, because at this moment you think Godzilla's dead. You think, oh, she's dead. She's been killed by the submarine, which, again, the submarine fight was great. I love that. It would have been fantastic if she actually bit one of the submarines in half, and like maybe even like picked one up and ripped one in half. That'd be great as well, like a big massive toy. But no, you've got to have the suspense that like one submarine takes her out, done. But she comes back out, and this bit again, this is what gets me. This is why I feel so sorry, and this is why I wish I didn't jump ahead, was because, she comes out, she's like, where are my kids? Where are they? And she looks down, she sees like this dead body, and she's nuzzling it with her nose. And she's nuzzling it, it's not moving, obviously, it's dead. And she looks up and she looks down, she sees, Matthew Broderick's character, she sees, Roach, she sees Audrey, she sees Victor. But there was already a scene prior where she comes out of the ground and she looks at Nick, and she kind of sniffs him, breathes on him, sort of thing. And then she sees the food. So she's already got his scent. She's got this look into him. So when she looks at him, there's that betrayal in her eyes, in Godzilla's eyes. That betrayal of like, you're fucked. What'd you do? Sort of thing. And it's that same sort of scene again if you watch King Kong, when what's his name? You've got the main character in that, Jack. he's in New York. Kong's going through New York looking for, his love. The blonde woman, and he turns around and he sees Jack, and Jack sees him, and Kong gives him that look of like, "You fucker, you bastard, you," sort of thing. "I'm gonna get you. Don't run away. Come here. I'm gonna rip you in shreds." And he chases him. It's that same sort of look, sort of like, "You're dead." And they all get in the car and they run, and Godzilla's chasing them. And at this point, Godzilla's got nothing to lose. He's like, "Well, that's it. You killed my kids. And again, it's still that sort of predator sort of instinct. That instinct of like, you've killed my cubs, my children, my brood. You're gonna die. Basically, as simple as that. There's no cut and dry about it. And they chase them through it, and you do feel, again, you feel sorry for Godzilla, because against that fact of, it's just instincts. You've killed the kids, of course they're going to attack you because you've killed their kids. Any of them mother would do the same. But yeah, it always gets me when they take Godzilla out, and obviously they would have had to, but when they do, it's quite sad. But the way this movie ends is the fact of, at the end, it zooms into Madison Square Garden. Somehow one egg survived somehow, and the Godzilla comes out of it screaming, and then it ends. Now, obviously, I know they was originally planned for more. I think they were planned to make more movies, about 2 movies after this one. But they didn't in the end. They ended up going with a TV series, which I think only lasted 1 series. But that series, I was actually looking into it. It's kind of interesting, the Godzilla TV series, because the way that they structure it is the fact of, you still got the same characters from this, I believe, but they end up taking the baby Godzilla at the end of this movie, and using it for good, and using that Godzilla to fight other kaiju monsters, which sounds brilliant to me. I couldn't find anywhere online. I'm sure if I go on the Internet Archive, there's probably a few episodes on there, but I couldn't find any full episodes anyway, on YouTube, of the series. Maybe I found a few clips here and there, but that idea sounds really, really cool. And that would have been a cool idea for a sequel if this movie had done well, and been well received by audiences. Who knows, that you would have maybe got another sort of Godzilla sort of film that would have had that young sort of Godzilla growing up, and this team using it, be like, oh, now we've got, King Ghidorah comes in, or any other sort of monster that they want to use. And then they could have brought Mothra in and had a sort of a Mothra and Godzilla team up. So it would have been brilliant as well. But again, we didn't get there because, again, the movie didn't do very well. And to be honest, I think after this movie, I don't think the people that own the rights to Godzilla, I think they were like, nah, we'll just take it back. And they were very hesitant for a very, very long time to allow anybody to have the rights to Godzilla apart from them. And it wasn't till Lionsgate came into the picture and were like, no, we want to do a monster sort of Godzilla series universe, and this is our plan, and we're going to do it properly. And I think that was 2014, and that Godzilla is not that bad. I quite like that Godzilla movie because it's faithful to the original character, and obviously what it's led to, some pretty good Godzilla movies and Kong movies and Skull Island and all that. It's done a pretty good job there. So yeah, this movie did a lot of damage, figuratively and literally. But I still like it. I still think it's really, really good. It's a popcorn flick, and it's a movie that's, it's 2 hours and something long, but it goes by very quickly. It's well paced, good action, good sort of set building. I think the only thing that really bothers me, again, as I mentioned, we'll come back to it, was the fact of the design of Godzilla. It's not terrible, but again, it's not Godzilla. I respect them for wanting to do their own thing. I respect them for wanting to take something that was, something like Godzilla, but do it their version. I respect that. But then I always come back to the fact of, well, if you wanted to do that, really, then you should have done your own thing. You should have gone, okay, we want to do a Godzilla-like movie. So instead of just taking what people know of Godzilla and doing our own thing, we'll just do our own version of it and call it something else. And then, people will still would have said this is, a rip-off Godzilla, but at least you're free to do whatever you want, because if you watch this movie with no real sort of recognition, this movie doesn't belong to Godzilla. If you watch this movie like that it's got nothing to do with it, and you just watch it as a monster movie, you'll get enjoyment out of it. But when you go into it with if you're a fan of Godzilla and everything that you've seen of Godzilla up until this point, you can sit there and go, oh, because there are moments where it's got the sound of Godzilla when he screams. It's the sound of Godzilla. The atomic breath when it does it, it's not brilliant, but you can kind of get what they were trying to get at there. Um, but apart from the design, I love the design. It's very like a giant mutated iguana. It looks really, really cool. Again, I love iguanas. I love lizards. So I love the design. I just feel like calling it Godzilla is a little bit sacrilege because it doesn't have the atomic breath. If it like I think what would have saved it if they did have the atomic breath, honestly, if they generally had the moment where he goes to, where he starts to charge himself up and the spines on his back start to light up. If they did that, and then even if it wasn't really powerful, just like that, like if you ever played Skyrim, when you can do the shouts, the dragon shouts, like the foos, something like that. That would have been good as well. Even if they didn't want to do the whole hog, go the full way, if they didn't want to dedicate completely to it, even if they had a little bit of an atomic breath, even if it was weak, that still would have been cool, because then you could have had Godzilla, like, instead of jumping up and biting helicopters in half, which again is a cool scene, you could have had him do his atomic breath and like that, and then like chop buildings in half, or do giant holes straight through buildings. And or you could have a moment where, like, he wants to bury into the ground, but he's not digging fast enough, so he charges up and into the ground, and then he just keeps doing that as he digs, and he just burrows a huge hole, crater into the ground, that sort of thing. I'm just thinking of the visual spectacle, sort of thing. So yeah, I can't sit here and call this movie a Godzilla movie, because Godzilla, as they have it in this movie, doesn't feel like Godzilla. It feels like a giant monster. And again, if they could have called it Subject Zero Escapes or something like that, then fine. But calling it a Godzilla movie just feels a little bit sort of, no. But again, it's a westernized version of Godzilla. It's the fact of, okay, how would the Americans, the West, do a Godzilla movie like this, or like this for the time? Obviously, we've seen what they do now, and they're more faithful. But at the time, during the 90s, during the early 2000s, and this happened with a lot of movies, with a lot of licenses, was the fact of, I know what came before, but I want to do something different. This is America, baby. We make what we want to make, so we're going to do something different, and X, Y, and Z, and blah blah blah. And to be honest, Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin, sorry. They're known for making movies like this. Like, for God's sakes, if you look at their sort of movie history, Independence Day, Godzilla, where is it? Day After Tomorrow. I really love Day After Tomorrow. What was that other movie? 2012. They did Stargate, which I actually really quite like. Stargate. They did Moonfall in 2022, which I haven't seen it all the way, but I've heard it's not great. Independence Day, Resurrection. I'm trying to think what else. That's mostly what the 10,000 BC, which isn't a bad movie. It's just a bit too long. I respect what they were trying to do there, but that movie was just way longer than it needed to be. If they shortened it down and had a bit more action, potentially. Anyway, we're not here to talk about it. The point I'm trying to make is the fact of, they're known for making big, huge, blockbuster sort of movies, popcorn films. And that's what they did here with that, is where they turned the idea of Godzilla, made it a very westernized, popcorny sort of movie. Did they succeed or not? Well, I think that's up to people's personal views. I love it. I enjoy it. I've got it on DVD, and it's a film that I happily put on, I happily watch. And even though I don't class it as a Godzilla movie, and it's kind of funny, I think the people that made Godzilla, they did an animated show or animated movie where this Godzilla tries to attack proper Godzilla, and within the first 3 minutes of that film, and the proper Godzilla ends up picking him up, throwing him into the Sydney Opera House, and then atomic blasts him and kills him. So they just retconned it instantly, So yeah, there's a little bit of beef there, which again is completely understandable. But for what this movie is, coming to my overall thoughts, again, I hate to keep repeating myself, but for what this movie is, it's a popcorn flick. It is a monster of the week sort of movie. It is a movie that you can watch and shut your brain off and be like, action, big spectacle, huge monster, great, cool. You could shut your mind off and do that. Or, you can sit and watch it and be like, oh, this is a pretty cool idea, pretty cool concept, radiation, mutating creatures. This creature running off instincts, just wanting to survive and not being allowed to survive because it's too dangerous to live because it's too much of a danger to the rest of the world. Again, big military action, all things like that. So yeah, it is one of them movies where you can just enjoy it for what it is. You don't have to sit there and say, "Oh, this is highbrow. This is cinema." You don't have to be a Roger Ebert and criticize everything. Just enjoy it for what it is. It's a giant monster movie. Forget that it's got the name Godzilla. And just watch it for what it is. And I feel like you'd enjoy it for that. I know I do. I know when I watch it, I try not to think of it as a Godzilla movie. I just think of it as a giant monster movie with some great actors, funny dialogue, fantastic scenes, popcorn flicky. That's it. So that's my overall thoughts, is the fact of I love it, I enjoy it. I can see where people don't like it, and there are moments where I can sit there and go, oh God, they shouldn't have changed that, they shouldn't have changed that. But at the end of the day, they did. This movie came out when I was born. It's 28 years old. They're not going to change it now. You know what I mean? So instead of dogging on it and saying it's the worst thing ever, just enjoy it for what it is and just have a bit of fun. And I was entertained, and that was the main thing, is I was entertained. I enjoyed it for what it is. Anyway, so that's my overall sort of thoughts. As for the trivia, so there's a bit of trivia for this movie, if I can really find it. Where is it? There it is. So this movie features more Simpson voice actors than any other project besides The Simpsons itself. You've got Hank Azaria, Harry Shearer, and Nancy Cartwright. When The Simpsons later did a Godzilla parody called Homerzilla, they referenced that Homerzilla received a Hollywood remake that failed. A jab at this movie, the episode's end stating that Homerzilla will one day return just as soon as the Zilla from film is forgotten. Producer Dean Devlin claimed that because TriStar was very secretive about the actual design of Godzilla, the studio created unique fake designs and sent them to different merchandise manufacturers, which was done to test whether the companies could be trusted or not. After Fruit of the Loom leaked images of Godzilla on the internet in November of 1997, they lost their license to sell any Godzilla-related apparel. Devlin also claimed that the mold maker who was hired accidentally based the Godzilla design on one of those fakes. When the mold makers found out about that, he destroyed the designs but forgot to destroy the mold as well, which was then discovered and taken pictures from. However, when the official design was eventually revealed, it turned out to be essentially the same design as the alleged fake leak. Roland Emmerich admitted that he did not like most original Godzilla movies, although he was fond of Godzilla 1954. Then why the hell did you take the project on for, you numpty? Sorry. Anyway, forget that. Moving on. And then praises it in the German Cinema magazine as a masterful disaster movie. He claimed that he only agreed to the project after being promised to be able to do whatever he wanted with the series. Oh, okay, that makes sense. That's why he did it. This was in contrast to the film's original director, Jean Debont, who grew up a fan of the character. Looking back on the film, TriStar producer Robert N. Fried described how team took over Godzilla was one of the worst cases of executive incompetence I'd ever observed in my 20-year career. One of the golden assets of our time was managed as poorly and ineptly as anybody can manage an asset. Emmerich himself has since expressed regret in taking the job, given his lack of passion for the subject matter. Yeah. I can't disagree with that, to be honest. It's the fact of, I get it, right? If you're given a project like Godzilla and you're somebody who is known for making big blockbuster action set piece sort of movies, again, like Independence Day, that sort of thing, who wouldn't jump at the bit of making a giant monster movie where you can have loads of destruction and action? I get it. And then being given complete creative freedom. Again, I get it. But this is what annoys me. If you have no passion for the source material, if you have no passion for the concept, the idea, the Godzilla himself, then maybe you should sit there and go, yes, I can do whatever I want creatively. But if I'm not going to be faithful, and I know I'm not going to be faithful, then what's the point? You know what I mean? It's better to give it to somebody else who has a more focused vision and love and passion for it than just being like, I'll do it because they let me do whatever I want. Because you can't always be guaranteed greatness. And even though I like it, as I've already mentioned, you still get that moment of like, yeah, I might like it, but everybody else didn't. So yeah, I don't know. But at least now looking back, he's regret taking the job and that he should have given it to somebody who has more passion for the subject matter. So at least he's realised, yeah, that was the bad one, guys. Because most people don't. Most people go, oh yeah, I've still stand by it. It's still the best thing I ever made. And then you sit there and go, just be honest with us, mate. So fair play to him. In a television interview, Matthew Broderick said that the entire cast were given wetsuits to wear underneath their costumes while filming in Hawaii. He was upset because his wetsuit zipped up in the back, which made it difficult to put on every day. One day during the break in filming, he was talking with co-star Hank Azaria, who had his shirt off, revealing a wetsuit that zipped up in front. Broderick remarked, "Oh, your wetsuit zips up in the front." Puzzled, Azaria replied, "They all zip up in the front?" Broderick had been putting his wetsuit on backwards every single day. Steven Spielberg tried to talk to Roger Emmerich out of making the film, considering it a silly idea for Hollywood to try and remake Godzilla. I agree. They've done it perfectly now, since 2014, but of the time, no. Remake of Godzilla. Spielberg later told Entertainment Weekly that he didn't bother to see the film, stating, "The only Godzilla I saw was the one with Raymond Burr. I purposely stayed away from seeing TriStar's Godzilla because I didn't want to get anything between me and my memory of my favorite Godzilla movie of all time." And you know what? I think that's a good way to end it. And that's a good way to end it. Like, Steven Spielberg was like, look, I have love and passion for the original thing. Don't do it. Emmerich did it anyway, and out of respect for his love of the series, his love for the character of Godzilla, and potentially his relationship with Ron Emmerich, he was like, look, I'm not going to watch it. He didn't, and to be honest, fair play to him, fair play. So yeah, that'd be a good place to end it there with a Steven Spielberg quote. But I hope you all enjoyed it. I hope you liked it. I know I was a bit here, there, and everywhere with this one. But again, as I mentioned, this always happens. Whenever you get me talking about something that I love, this is just the way it is. To be honest, it's going to be the same next week because I'm also going to talk about another monster movie that I absolutely love and adore and is one of my favourite monster movies. And actually, here's a bit of a sort of hint for all you sort of people out there who've been listening to the podcast for the longest of time. I've already technically talked about this movie, or shall we say, I've already technically talked about this character once before in my first year of podcasting. And I talked about the video game of this movie. So if you've been listening long enough and you know what that is, then you know what is coming. And for those of you that don't, maybe go back and do a bit of research and look at my older episodes. Unless you can't be bothered, then, you'll find out soon. But if you are going to find out the sort of normal way, not sort of the hardcore way, then again, if you want to find out, then make sure that you follow me on Twitter at Howdy Beans _ pod. You can follow me on Instagram and TikTok at the Howdy Beans podcast. Also, if you listen to this on YouTube and Spotify, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and to follow me on Spotify and to rate the podcast 5 stars. You can also leave comments now down below on Spotify, so please do that. And so thank you very much for listening. I've been your host, Luke Howdy Bean. You've been listening to the Howdy Beans podcast, and until the next one, bye-bye, Beans.